Alright, in this video I'm going to be going over safety tips for building fake rock, and also have a section on just for waterfalls. So what we've got here is a little test piece that I'm using EPS polystyrene. So this is a piece left over from a larger scale Grand Canyon that I never did or never finished. So this will be our sort of guinea pig piece that I won't be really using for anything else other than this video, and will be our simulated basking spot. So I'm going to go ahead and apply the layers of mortar. I've used non-sanded and sanded grout in the past, but this is foam coat from the hot wire foam factory. So this stuff is specifically designed to coat foam. So you want to apply at least 2 layers depending on the strength of your pet lizard. So bearded dragons might need 3 layers, whereas another, I guess, smaller lizard might only need 1. So I'm really going to coat the top of the basking spot. So everything else needing, however many layers according to how big your lizard is or strong. But in addition to that, coating or applying more coats of whatever mortar you use to the basking spot to try to build it up. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a little simple layer of paint because it's definitely part of the process. I'm using, as far as safety is concerned, that is, I'm using an acrylic paint called Craft Smart that is non-toxic. So really not going to do any type of detail, just painting it to get that color down. But here's something I did on the advanced fake rock wall, which I'll show a little bit of a clip from. I've got tiles. Just go to the hardware store and got these tiles that I'm just going to put into a baggie and hit at least once, maybe 2 or 3 times to try to get these different shaped pieces depending on the shape of your basking spot. But this one definitely, with it being a little bit different, it's flat on a couple of different sides, but it's got some curves and different organic looking shapes. So really just trying to build this up. This is, I guess, the ultimate in trying to create that tough, impervious, to the punishment that the basking spot is going to receive as far as the heat. Here I've got the fake rock wall advanced sculpt, and you can see there the couple of layers of tile that I ended up using for the basking spot. But I'm going to go ahead and apply the sealant. I'm using a obviously non-toxic sealant. I've used Mod Podge in the past, but this is Shieldsol. It's supposed to be non-toxic to humans, animals, and vegetation. So I'm even going to cover the bottom of it. And you'll want to apply 4 layers of this, ideally waiting 72 hours in between each layer. And what I'm doing here is sprinkling on non-toxic sand to the actual basking spot. And then once that has dried, like I say, ideally 72 hours later, going to apply another full coat. And again, before the sealant dries, going to sprinkle non-toxic sand onto that basking spot. So I'm going to do this over and over again to really try to build up the basking spot that will obviously take the most punishment as far as the heat, and a lot of wear and tear as far as traffic. So applying yet another layer, and gonna again at some point here sprinkle more sand. And so really you can do this. On each video, if you've noticed, I've got annotation that is saying to do this to build up your basking spot, really caking on the sand at this point. Obviously a little too thick, so I'll brush away what is loose after that particular layer has dried. So, but just really a good way to build up the spot so that it's going to be able to take that amount of heat. And some of you are probably asking, what about the surrounding areas that are obviously going to take quite a bit of heat, maybe not as much as the actual basking spot. But you can do the same thing. You can do this with the entire structure, actually, if you want. Maybe you would do this to all of the high traffic areas, but especially, the basking spot, to get that to where it's completely built up. And obviously the last layer you want to be of sand instead of the sealant. So brushing away the loose sand there, and you can really get it to where it's quite tough. So I've got a temp gun here. I'm going to try to do this with the camera not cutting away, so you can see. I'm going to go ahead and get a temp, and I've purposely overheated this just for purposes of demonstration. So this is even hotter than what a Euromastix lizard would want, or what you would want for their basking spot. So 127 degrees Fahrenheit. And I'm going to go ahead and put my hand on it. I think a lot of people have received emails and comments saying, well, is this going to catch fire? Is it going to burst into flames? Or is this going to be safe? And as you can see, I'm not, the camera didn't cut away. I'm not having to remove my hand because of the heat. Now, it's very warm, but it's not so hot that I have to remove my hand quickly. So I'm going to do another test where I've really overheated the structure, not even on the basking spot, just to show you that it should be tough enough to handle this. But a dangerous, very dangerous temperature of 160 almost degrees Fahrenheit, which obviously you would definitely not want to have this type of a temperature. But as you can see, it's not catching fire. It's not bursting into flames. I'm able to touch this. I'm not able to, keep my hand on it as I was with the 127 degree Fahrenheit test where the basking spot was heated to that level. But I'm able to touch it. It's not burning my flesh. So obviously you would not want to heat up, any spot in your cage to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. But just to show through the purposes of demonstration that it is able to withstand the heat. I think there's a lot of concern with the EPS or polystyrene, the EPS polystyrene, in that it is going to start to give off gas and, obviously toxic gas. I did some research on the, polystyrene and its toxicity as far as burning. It has a softening point of 212 degrees Fahrenheit. So, do your own research, but that is what I found on several different, from several different sources. Beyond 212 degrees Fahrenheit, obviously at some point it would then start to melt and give off fumes. Here I've got particular area where I have purposely taken a hammer to it just to show, if you have some sort of damage to your fake rock, what you can do if you have a particular area of damage that's larger than this little area, you would probably want to bust out the mortar, the foam coat or grout, and just, go over it again, and then decide if you want to put, paint on it, if it's, something that you want to, redo visually, and then obviously seal it. But you can use this method where if you have such, an area that is damaged, apply some of the same non-toxic sealant, and then apply some of the same non-toxic sand as I did with the basking spot, and building it up in layers of sand sealant, let it dry, come back, days later, repeat the same thing, sand sealant, sand, and build it up to the point where you've got a very tough exterior that is protecting the lizard from the damaged area. So here I get questions about the how to safely clean a cage. And what I'm doing here is I've got a mixture of half water, half white vinegar, and using a toothbrush. Sometimes you'll be away, obviously, from your place for 9 hours at a time or more, and they'll do their business, and they'll just be sitting there for all that time, getting really tough. And so sometimes what I would have done is using that mixture of half white vinegar, half water, and sometimes a toothbrush, and cleaning it. And then once it's clean, kind of dabbing away the vinegar residue, and then taking a bottle of just pure water, going over the same area, and trying to rinse it so that the cage doesn't smell any more like white vinegar than what it already will. But it's all natural, safe cleaning agent. Might not be the best cleaner, but it is non-toxic. So here is the culprit for all of those little messes that were created in the advanced fake rock cage that I built. But what I would often notice is that every now and then I would hear my bearded dragon scratching like nobody's business, digging for gold for hours or so it seemed, and realizing that he can get up on his hind legs and get to certain areas that you might not think that a pet lizard would be able to get to. And a bearded dragon's got a certain amount of strength, and with his claws being able to get into certain areas and potentially cause some damage. So what I did was remove him, get the structure out, and in taking sealant, at the time I was using Mod Podge, and which might actually be better for this type of situation where because it's thicker, you can really cake that on and build up a surface that he's not able to get through. So it just might be a good idea to go over certain areas that obviously he can get to, and maybe certain areas that you might have to rethink and treat those areas as well with the process of applying sealant and then sand. Depending on what type of sealant you're using, it might just be sealant. And obviously letting it air out before you put them back in. So another safety item that you might want to think about purchasing is I ended up getting as large as I could find at the time, sort of a Rubbermaid type container. Obviously you wouldn't want to have it outside with the lizard, but just to show what it looks like, getting one of these really large containers for an emergency, or if you are going to reseal the fake rock, you would want them out of the cage for 72 hours. But to have this and a couple of crude hides, such as boxes, and maybe like a ceramic plate to act as, like a makeshift basking spot, and or certain other situations that might arise, such as an emergency. At one point, I dealt with we were dealing with the remnants of a hurricane, and our power was out for over 40 hours. And so I was all ready to, get him into this container and bring him to work where the power was on. And so it might just be a good idea, to have something like this where it's big enough for them to roam around. They're not going to get too stressed with it being too small of a container, where you can put, create a temperature gradient. You've got a hot side and a colder side or less hot. A couple of different boxes, as I said, to create little hides, and of course some sort of system where you're able to hang a light, so you can get the proper UV and the proper heat. So just a good decision to have something like this just in case there's an emergency, or if you do the inevitable resealing of your fake rock. So now I'm going to go over some safety tips for the waterfalls that I've built. And really, if you've been watching the waterfall videos as of late, I've got an annotation saying that at this point, I really can't recommend that anybody build these for living creatures anymore. I think there's just too many steps. I think there's too many variables involved in order to, try to make this 100% safe. I don't know that it is technically possible for any of these processes to be 100% safe. It's something whereby, you've got to be checking the water. If you haven't gone over a certain area with the silicone properly, there's the potential for, chemicals to be leaking into the water. It's something whereby, they sell aquarium grade or food grade silicone sometimes in the stores because they know that silicone can sometimes break down and you end up having to make a repair. So having said that, all of the steps involved were geared towards making this as safe as possible. But I must admit that I have not cared for such a creature as like a toad or salamander or Chinese water dragon with one of these waterfalls. Even though, all of the steps, as I've said, were geared towards, creating as safe as an environment as humanly possible, I don't think that there's anybody that could possibly know that these types of structures that are homemade are 100% safe. So, and some of you might be thinking, well, why not just delete all of the waterfall videos that are seemingly, I guess, geared towards living creatures, or why even go over safety tips, which I'm about to do. And it's because I think there will still be those that will, ignore this advice to just buy one from the pet store and not build these, and they'll go ahead and do it. And because of that, they'll at least have this video and the other videos that have the annotations about safety tips in order to guide them, as much as is possible as far as the safety. So one, the water itself needs to be clean. Obviously, you cannot use tap water. Needs to be dechlorinated, cannot have chlorine. Ideally, a reverse osmosis system, and one that puts the minerals back in, because you definitely do not want to use distilled water because they need those nutrients. Bottled water, would work, but you need to be doing like a pH testing from like a sophisticated pH testing kit of, where is your pH level? Is it at 7, which is neutral? Some do well in a little lower than 7, where, their environment is more acidic or basic. So all these things, are involved where you really need to be doing things such as testing the water and removing the water, changing the water, if not every day, then every other day. Lizards have a thicker skin. They're a little bit more hardier than, say, an amphibian that, like a frog or salamander, that they've got the thinner skin, which is able to absorb the toxins easier. But the lizards still need to have as clean a water as possible. So definitely you wouldn't want to use these techniques to make a food or water dish. I think you're just asking for trouble, with that. But the type of silicone, you want it to either be food grade or at least aquarium grade silicone. You want to have it, don't be in a hurry when you're doing it, making sure you're going over every single area at least 2 or 3 times. Letting it dry or cure for at least a week. And then once it's cured or dried, doing the proper rinses where you're filling it up with water, dumping it, filling it up with water, and repeating that process a few times. And then, as I've said, getting a proper pH, ammonia testing kit to make sure that your water is as clean as possible. And of course, the type of water, that it is filtered or bottled. So all of these things, trying to gear towards creating as safe as an environment as humanly possible. As I've said, I think there's just too many variables, too many steps involved in creating these for a living creature. I know there's a lot of people creating these just for a tabletop, Waterfall. So that's really all I can recommend these be created for, some, for recreation or just a conversation piece for like your living room. So please consider all of this of what I've said and review, the video itself, and hopefully I'll be adding through annotations as far as any type of helpful advice concerning the safety of keeping a pet. Thanks for listening.